yeah, and I know that we gon' win, bro.
So, hello and welcome to this late-breaking edition of the Wilani Worldwide Mass Action Speaking Tour. This is a modified version of a talk that I gave to 20 different groups of people as part of a nationwide effort to get people to come to a convergence we were planning in Atlanta in November called Block Cop City. Since then, a few more people have asked me to talk about the movement, and this talk has gotten longer because more things have happened. So sorry about that, but I think it's all pretty important. Today, I'm going to tell you a brief history of the Wilani Forest, which is the land where they're trying to build Cop City in Atlanta right now. I'm going to tell you about the movement against Cop City in Atlanta. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the connections to the movement for Palestine and a little bit about Cop City NYC, which has just been announced. After that, we're going to do a Q&A, and I'm going to be joined by one of my comrades from the movement. A little history of the Wilani Forest. Once upon a time, for thousands of years, this land was inhabited by indigenous people, most recently the Muskogee tribe, Native Americans. From 1821 to 1830, following the Indian Removal Act, the US government forcibly displaced these people from this land and sent them along the Trail of Tears to an Indian reservation in Oklahoma. They then gave the land to white settlers, the government that is. So after that, this land became a plantation worked by slaves. And then in the early 1900s, starting around 1920, it was a prison farm worked by slaves. You may say, wow, I thought there was no more slavery after the Civil War, although you guys probably know that's not true because you're all in DSA and you do political education. The 13th Amendment that abolished chattel slavery had a big asterisk in front of it because it said, oh, there's one exception. People can still be enslaved if it's punishment for a crime. If they're in prison, you can absolutely still enslave them. So that's how that worked. Continuing the threads of racial oppression and class exploitation that American capitalism runs on, and rebranding slavery into for-profit prison labor, which is a practice that still continues to this day. So in the 1990s, the prison farm closed and the forest was allowed to grow back. And this space was used as a public park, kind of by default. The people in the neighborhood around the park, which is a largely Black working class neighborhood, really enjoyed this public space. You can use it for whatever you want. People would walk their dogs there, they'd bring their kids there, have picnics. In recent years, kids would throw raves in the forest. It was just a magical place. So then in 2017, in an effort to make this park more official, the Atlanta Department of City Planning named it South River Park and drew up some plans to preserve it as a public park and a conservation zone identified as one of the lungs of Atlanta because of its important ecological role. We have studies from experts saying that the air quality in Atlanta would be substantially worse without this forest there. We have other studies saying that flooding would be even worse if it weren't for the forest, tamping down on the worst effects of climate change. So definitely not a good time to be cutting down any amount of trees. So they announced these plans to make it, keep it a park. Nobody protested that, but around the same time, a competing plan was floated by different parts of the city government, and that plan was substantially more controversial. Oh, here's a picture of the forest. It's very nice. The new plan. The movement named this police training facility Cop City because of plans to construct a mock city to train police in urban protest suppression tactics. So it's going to have firing ranges, explosive facilities, dorm-style living quarters for cops from all over the country, and even places like Israel, more on that later, to come to Atlanta and train in urban warfare tactics, in which they would use military force against civilians. So basically, a police militarization facility. Plans were floating around for a few years to build Cop City, but they really kicked into high gear in 2021. Here's a map of this facility that they are currently building. So why did these plans get supercharged in 2021? Well, I think we all know what happened in 2020, right? We had the George Floyd uprising in all 50 states. People were fighting the police and rising up against racist police violence and overlapping and connected issues. And, things got pretty spicy. So the state is like, we can't let this happen again. We need to be prepared to put this down. And this isn't just a conspiracy theory on our part. Like, they are making the connections for us. In some of the RICO indictments of activists that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, they put the start date of the conspiracy, the alleged conspiracy, I should say, as the day that George Floyd was murdered. Now, plans to build this facility had not even been made public then. So they're making these connections for us. Also, there were issues with morale in the Atlanta Police Department and in police departments all over the country. Cops were saying, oh, when nobody likes us, like, as absurd as that sounds, they really got their feelings hurt. They were having recruitment problems. A lot of young people were thinking twice about, oh, is this really the best way to serve my community? Maybe I should be a teacher or something. So, yeah, they wanted a shiny new facility to attract more cops to join the force. And in order to try to recruit more cops, they traveled all over the place, and they still are. That picture is taken in the New York City subway, promoting an Atlanta Police Department hiring event that they had right here in New York City, and they're still having them. They just had one very recently. So at the same time that we are spreading all over the place and, talking to people, trying to promote our side of things, they are as well. So in addition to the Cop City in Atlanta, there are plans to construct these kinds of facilities all over the country, including right here in New York City. But everyone's kind of looking to the one in Atlanta to see how it's going to go as a bellwether for how it's going to go elsewhere. And I imagine what happens in New York City will also be sort of a focal point going forward, seeing as New York is one of the biggest cities in the country, as well as a place that tends to capture the national imagination. My water, 1 second. So, one cool thing about the movement in Atlanta is that it stitches together the abolitionist movement, the movement against police and prisons, and the movement to save the earth from climate change. So how are these movements connected? Well, there are two ways to respond to climate catastrophe, I think, as things progress. We could see a massive expropriation of private property, especially of the fossil fuel companies that are setting the world on fire, right? Which would necessarily involve an attack on private property. That is the way to actually solve the problem, right? Or we can see increased efforts to manage the effects of climate change, police populations as they migrate throughout the world, and tamp down on resources and make sure they go to the people on top. Additionally, the police state is being used against people who are trying to save the earth from climate change, right? Because that's their job under capitalism, is to protect private property at all costs. So who do they send when someone is sitting in a tree trying to keep it from being cut down? Who do they send when we have indigenous water protectors trying to prevent a leaky pipeline from being built through native lands? They send the police. So that is why the movement for the earth must also be a movement against the police. And we used to have that on stickers, but we are all out. Very sorry. So, what have people done to oppose Cop City? So, this movement, hold on 1 second. So this has been largely a decentralized and autonomous movement with a horizontal structure. Many different groups are involved and many different people are involved, but everyone really respects each other and each other's tactics. There's a real respect for diversity of tactics here. And I think that is part of what has made it such a powerful movement for the state to reckon with. So lots of different people have tried lots of different things. I think one reason why this mutual respect has been so healthy is because the very first people who figured out what was going on and did direct action against it, they did an act of sabotage on the construction site. And that is what you see here. You see some graffiti. I don't know if it's that exact one, but it has happened many times. And every group that's come in since then has kind of had to reckon with and respect that. It's important to note that the Muskogee people, the original people who lived on this land before they were kicked off of it, are involved with the movement against Cop City to defend the forest. And this video is one such activist explaining in his own words why it's important to him to defend the forest.
My name is Jamon Kearney, and I'm here in the Willamette Forest, which is just outside of the city of Atlanta in the state of Georgia. It was only a few months ago that I stood in this forest, reintroducing this natural world to my presence. I spoke my name and my clan lineage in our ancestral language in order that this natural world would know what right I had to stand upon this earth mother. I sang songs in my ancestral language, and I introduced my children to this forest and showed them the territorial domains where our ancestors thrived and from which they were violently removed from. I assisted in the first of many migrations of Muskogee people back to our homelands in hopes of educating our people that it even exists, and we have a right to walk upon them and live as we see fit. But I am here also in hopes of educating others of how to exist in this world, how to exist in harmony and balance with all of creation and all of its diversity, reminding us that violence in all of its many forms only eliminates the energy of life found in all. What is happening now in the Willamette Forest and also in the rest of the world is violence. Extractive industries and political entities are continuing to lead the way in perpetuation of this violence in this country and abroad. The destruction of one tree in violence impacts all of life. The desecration of one waterway can have harm to every member of this world. The so-called construction of a militarized facility to train paramilitary forces is violent. Its impact on the suffering our communities locally and potentially across the world is unmeasurable. It must stop before more harm even takes place. Today, I stand in solidarity with land defenders and allies who are working, petitioning, and acting at every level to end this violence. I stand in solidarity with those who have recognized the dangers of this facility and are working to speak the truth. I was taught by my elders to act accordingly with the interest of those lives yet to come to this world in mind in all of my actions. My hope is that they will not have to suffer. I pray that this forest will still be intact when I am able to make footprints upon it once again, footprints that lay over those of my ancestors who walked here for millennium after millennium. I call upon all persons to join this movement in hopes that our children may live in peace and harmony for generations to come. Mado.
Okay. So Cop City has a lot of different contractors and a lot of different funders funneling money to it through a fake charity called the Atlanta Police Foundation. Here we have sort of a map of some of these financial connections, and the movement to stop Cop City has very effectively power mapped and figured out who is involved with this project. That has enabled activists to do things like show up at corporate board meetings as well as at various important people's houses, yelling at them, embarrassing them in front of their shareholders, in front of their communities. And a few of these contractors and funders have dropped out as a result of this kind of pressure. There has also been 6 weeks of action in the forest. These photos are taken from one of them. There have been music festivals and super fun parties and, you know, basically carrying out the, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. There have been a number of peaceful marches, including with members of the clergy. Here we see some members of the Faith Coalition to Stop Cop City in a peaceful march in downtown Atlanta. There have been a number of religious ceremonies in the forest of all different faiths. When I was there during one of the weeks of action, we had a Purim party. That was super fun. But there's definitely been some more like quiet and solemn things as well. There was a Muskogee stomp dance, which again involved the Muskogee activists, the people whose ancestors were kicked off of this land. And it was a very special thing for everyone to be able to participate in. Here we have some Indigenous activists delivering a notice of eviction to the Atlanta city government, demanding that Cop City not be built on Muskogee lands and not be built at all. There have been a number of tree planting events and also food distribution, mutual aid. There have been children's marches, and it's always very cute and fun when the kids come out. Turns out they care about the trees and they understand this issue on a pretty basic level. Okay, another tactic that I want to talk about is the referendum. So it's currently being repressed by the city, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So ostensibly, if you get lots and lots of signatures on the ballot in Atlanta, if you get lots and lots of signatures from registered voters, you can get a referendum on the ballot to let the people of Atlanta actually vote on whether or not they want something to happen. In this case, Cop City. So activists collected over 120,000 signatures of Atlanta registered voters in an effort to get this referendum on the ballot. Now, that is about twice as many people as voted in the last mayoral election. So this is a monumental effort. Signatures were supposed to be counted. The referendum was supposed to happen a long time ago. Here we see about a year ago, a June city council meeting with record-breaking participation. More than 1,000 people attended protesting the Cop City project. There were something like 14 hours of recorded commentary, but after that, the city council voted to fund the project anyway. So the referendum effort continues. Here we have one such event, one of many events where people are collecting signatures. Here we have them delivering all these signatures outside of City Hall. And, you would think if we lived in a real democracy, the city government would let the people vote, but they're not. And they're tying the referendum up in this bad faith legal runaround that has continued for many months now and may continue indefinitely. So I think that's an important thing to note, that whenever people are like, well, why don't you just, vote, use the official channels, the democratic channels, you could point and say, we tried that and they didn't let us. So that brings me to our next slide. This was a black bloc that happened in downtown Atlanta the day after a protester named Tortuguita was murdered by the police. And it was widely known as the Revenge March. And some of the businesses, especially the banks funding the project, had their windows smashed, had their property damaged. So all of these things together have made up a very powerful movement, and there already are some victories that the movement can claim. Here we have a few examples, just a few examples of contractors, of funders, of individuals on the Atlanta Police Foundation that decided to cut ties due to pressure from the movement. So because this movement has been so powerful and so effective, oh shit, I had another video I wanted to play about diversity of tactics. Do you have the Mary Hooks video?
The Twitter video?
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay, before moving on to the section on repression, I want to play you this video because it's just one very concrete example of the mutual respect for diversity of tactics that exists in this movement. So this is Mary Hooks, field secretary for the Movement for Black Lives, which is a 501c3 organization. Now, you might expect a 501c3 organization to try to distance itself from anything too militant because they don't want to lose their tax exempt status. That's not how Mary Hooks answered this question. It's a little confusing. The reporter asked if she condones any kind of property destruction that's happened. She heard condemn, and it's very clear from her answer that that's what she heard. So I guess it's not that confusing because I just told you. Anyway, let's play the video.
Everyone who spoke, like, for multiple big advances, you condone the arson that happened, though, against the motorcycles and the other stuff.
Hell no. No, not at all. And if I'm being honest with you, Atlanta deserves more than that. Real talk. They're lucky. This city is lucky. This country is lucky. Atlanta has its hands in literally murdering Palestinians right now. You think we give a damn about some equipment? Not at all. Not at all. But some of us, we cannot take that risk. And those who can, bless them. Bless them. That's right. I cannot take that risk. But Lord knows I'll sit with my lighter and be like, damn. So the best thing that I can do is use my voice, use my feet, use my heart, and talk to my people and to organize. And I put my body on the line and show up as much as we can because we need every means necessary to deal in the police state in which we are dealing with. So I don't care now. And I would imagine my comrades would say the same. No, I'm not going to condemn nobody for burning up. No, sorry, brother, I ain't going to condemn nobody for doing righteously what they need to do when our city has silenced every quote-unquote proper democratic process. That's right. As one of the students say, if we don't get this in the courts, if we can't get this at council, then we're going to take it in the streets. That's right. Because our people, our children, my babies, are worth the risk. That's right. That's right.
Hell yeah. So, because this movement has been so powerful and so diverse and so broad and so, for the most part, getting along with itself, which is, not always the case, unfortunately, with movements, the state has been ramping up the repression to a high level. The person you see here is the protester named Manuel Paez-Terán, who went by the forest name of Tortuguita, who was killed in a multi-agency raid of the forest encampment in January of 2023. No third-party witnesses were around when this killing happened, conveniently enough for the cops. The cops claim that Tortuguita shot at them first, but they have yet to produce any definitive proof that that was the case. And according to the autopsy, Tort was sitting on the ground, cross-legged, with their hands in the air when they were executed by essentially a firing squad. According to the official autopsy, their body had at least 57 gunshot wounds in it, and an officer was wounded as well, but a number of sketchy things have come out since then. For instance, body cam footage where one cop says, "You fucked up your own officer," implying that he was wounded by friendly fire. So it might take a while to find out exactly what happened there, but I'm pretty sure we know the basics of it. But there's been a massive cover up, and Tort's mom, Belkis, as well as their father and brother have since joined the movement to try to continue the work that Tort was doing, as well as get justice for Tort's death, despite the massive cover up that is still ongoing. So a little timeline of the repression. On March 5th, there was an act of sabotage on the construction site by an anonymous group of people. In retaliation for this, the cops, who could not catch any of the people who did this, they were mad. So they decided to do a little collective punishment on the music festival, which was happening a ways away from the site where the sabotage occurred. So they raided the music festival, which was a part of this week of action, this Festival of Music and Resistance. They pointed their guns in this bouncy house that we're looking at right here. You could watch it on the Unicorn Riot live stream footage. Luckily, there was no one in there when they did that, but they arrested a bunch of people just for being there. This photo that looks like it was taken at Guantanamo Bay, that is people at the bond hearing, who were arrested at the music festival and charged. Some of them were charged with domestic terrorism. Some of them were charged under RICO laws, which are meant to go after the mafia. The only evidence in some of these cases was that the people had mud on their shoes. So obviously, I think the state was more concerned with scaring this movement away from action than, creating cases that would actually hold up in court. And we saw evidence of that more recently with the way that they've conducted the case against the people running the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, otherwise known as the Sol Fund 3. So in June of 2023, the police sent a SWAT team to raid 3 activist houses for the crime of running the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, which pays for things like zines, camping equipment, food distribution, and they bail people out of jail when they get arrested. So for that, they were subjected to a terrifying SWAT raid. But a fun update from this case recently is that the state completely fucked up its own case. The Georgia DA's office, they shared privileged attorney-client communications with the cops that they had pulled from the electronics that they confiscated in this raid. So now the defense attorney is petitioning to have the whole case thrown out. And, it feels optimistic. I don't want to say anything for sure. So at this point, about 100 people in the movement are facing charges. 42 people have domestic terrorism charges. 3 people are being charged with felony intimidation for flyering. 61 people are facing RICO charges. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Fun fact, up until Fani Willis recused herself from the Forest Defender case, and it went to the state level, the 3 RICO cases in the Fulton County DA's office were Donald Trump, Young Thug, and the Forest Defenders, which is very weird. Very fucking weird. That's what this banner that someone made is referring to. Free YSL, free Young Stoner Life Records, and all prisoners, of course. And, digging into this case a little bit, I now know how egregious it is trying to use lyrics from rap music to convict people of crimes. So needless to say, the movement stands in solidarity with Young Thug and the entire Young Stoner Life crew. We do not stand with Donald Trump. He can go fuck himself. So this brings us up to Block Cop City. So after the June week of action, we saw some of these tactics had sort of been exhausted, namely taking back the forest and having an encampment there. We needed sort of a middle option between maybe getting killed in the forest on the one hand and holding up a sign on the other. So what folks came up with was a nonviolent direct action, a mass action called Block Cop City. This was conceived in the mold of the anti-nuclear movement of the 1970s, which did massive site occupations at proposed sites of ecologically hazardous nuclear facilities, as well as the civil rights movement, which of course has deep roots in Atlanta. Nonviolent civil disobedience is very much legible to the people of Atlanta. So all of this amounted in effect to a People's Stop Work Order. And here, these photos are taken from another occupation of the construction site carried out by members of the Faith Coalition to Stop Cop City. So here's another one. different groups were sort of converging on this tactic at the same time because it really seemed like the move. Yeah, it was a way to get out of an impasse, basically, where more people than ever knew about Cop City, more people than ever were opposed to Cop City, but the number of people who were willing to show up and do direct action was getting smaller and smaller because the repression was so frightening. So yeah, Block Cop City was a strategy to grow the movement through the repression, a way to respond to the insane charges that people were getting, and a way of, you know, keeping the movement going. So, oh yeah, do we have time? We had a good hype video. There was a good hype video that we could play, I suppose. It's got some good shots of the forest too, and you can see like how much of it had been cut down already at the point that this video was made with drone footage. So yeah, I guess this brings us up to the first Weelani Worldwide Mass Action Speaking Tour, when I would play this video for groups of people and try to get them hyped.
Come on, man. And with the local DBC news, LL Cool J with a triumphant comeback. But tonight, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm rocking my pants, putting suckers in fear, making the tears rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, explosion, overpowering over the competition. I'm towering, wrecking shop. When I drop these lyrics that'll make you call the cops. Don't you dare stare. You better move. Don't ever compare me to the rest that are all get sliced and diced. Competition's paying the price. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. Don't you call this a regular jam. I'm gonna rock this land. I'm gonna take this city bitty world by storm. And I'm just getting warm.
Yeah. It still slaps, I gotta say. So, Block Cop City, it happened, folks. We got about 500 people to come from all over the country to Atlanta. And we had a few days of spokes councils where affinity groups from all different places could talk to each other, hammer out the final details of the plan, and, you know, make sure everyone felt good about it. There were also 2 days of direct action training from some experienced trainers to try to, you know, give people some idea what to expect and what to do in various situations. There was a drop off of about 100 people from the people who initially showed up to the day of the action itself, because some people decided they'd rather do support roles, and that is fine. There were lots and lots of support roles available. So here's a picture of the front of the march. And the march went from a park in Atlanta to down sort of a forest path, and then it turned in an effort to evade the police and went down a road. Unfortunately, the cops knew that this was happening, and they sent all the cops in Georgia to stop this march before it reached the construction site. And there's a little video of how it went down if you want to play that. We don't have to play too much of it.
So it looks like the two officers in charge are about to make contact with the front of the march. We can show. Yep. Hey. So as they keep moving, move back, move back. So the march is just moving. The riot police are moving shields in now, forming a line. There's now the marches, banners have met the shields. More police officers are moving closer. Police officers charged a rubber bullet gun. They're yelling, "Get back." So we're on this side here. There's definitely a shoving match going on. Police are saying get back. Again, they've charged their weaponry, and they're sort of looking right now. But again, I don't really think they can do much at this point. People are just holding their space, holding their line, holding their front banners, and police are ramming their shields into them. Behind the police with shields, there are officers with AR-15 short barrel rifles, holding on to each other, looking on. It looks like they're throwing some equipment into this. Looks like a tear gas canister of some sort. Their tear gas is now going off, or at least there's some smoke. I'm not smelling it. And the police are continuing to push, trying to hold back. People are just holding, linked together, heading in this direction. It doesn't seem like tear gas. I'm smelling it. No, it looks like white smoke right now. They're throwing tear gas into the crowd. They're throwing munitions. Yeah, that's tear gas. Well, I should have worn my mask. I'm going to move away. Oh, the crowd's dispersing. People are being hit. Tear gas is pretty intense. Lots of tear gas is in there. People are putting their equipment on. Let me try and move away and put mine on. Can you hold this? Oh.
So you get the idea. There was a lot of fear. So, unfortunately, Black Cop City did not make it onto the construction site as initially planned to occupy it and shut down construction for the day. However, there were a number of victories that we could still claim, and I think it's important to talk about it. So there were about 500 people from all over the country that came to Atlanta at a time when activists in the US, their attention was deeply divided. They met up over the weekend, they talked to each other, they trained together, they did the march, and, unfortunately, they hit us with every single kind of less lethal munition short of live rounds, and, that stopped us. However, this group withstood all of these less lethal munitions, as well as the people in the front who kind of got clobbered by the riot shields by the cops. This group stayed together. No arrests were made. From the beginning, the community agreements where we come together and leave together, and that happened. Construction was, in fact, shut down for a few days, not by an occupation of the construction site, but just because of all the mayhem that we caused for them. And we grew our networks. So one of the primary wagers of Black Cop City, in my opinion, was that we could use this NVDA to build our networks, build skills, get experience working together so that when more fucked up things happen that we need to respond to, we are all that much more capable of springing into action. And so it wasn't just about what happened on the day itself. It was just as much about what happened after November 13th. Now, going around the Northeast, talking to groups of students in advance of the action, I heard from a lot of college kids who were really angry about the state of the world, but they were afraid to engage in action. They weren't sure what to do. And a lot of the questions I got from these kids were questions about like how to push through fear, how to push through anxiety, and how to, still show up and engage in this, semi-spicy direct action. So a lot of these students came to Black Cop City, and many of those same students, not that long after, they set up encampments on their college campuses to protest US involvement in Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. So I think on that front, it was successful as a way of spreading tactics, generalizing tactics. And, people want to talk shit on the Zoomers, but a lot of them, they showed up and they were brave despite being scared. So props to them. And we saw a lot of bravery from college kids in the recent encampment movement. This photo is from Columbia University, where it started, but as you know, it happened all over the country and even in other parts of the world. So here is a thread from Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City on some of the tactics that can be used in other situations, and in fact have been used by students protesting the war on Gaza in many cases. So some of these tactics include dressing uniformly, using gas masks to keep from getting, tear gassed, reinforced banners to use as shields. Ours probably could have been more reinforced than it was, but we learn from our mistakes. The wedge formation is an important formation to know if you're trying to push through a line of police with as little violence and harm as possible done to the protesters. It's also a less violent way of engaging with the police, right? We made a decision in that moment not to fight them, not to use projectiles of any kind. And this wasn't an ideological commitment to nonviolence on anybody's part. It just felt tactical in that moment. Some more tactics. We have heat-resistant gloves to deal with the tear gas canisters without burning your hands. Unpredictable routes, try to mix it up or outsmart the cops. Sticking together, chants like "don't panic, stay tight, we will be all right." They do a lot to calm people down in such a situation. And I think dealing with repression is something that we also need to be smart about. And this movement has a lot to, this movement's learned a lot about that. So I think this is a good lead in to talking about the connections between Stop Cop City, Defend the Atlanta Forest, and the pro-Palestine anti-war movement. Of course, on the wide angle, these are both settler colonial societies predicated on ethnic cleansing and violently disciplining the people who were previously living there, both the US and Israel. But we don't have to zoom out that far to find connections, right? There's something called the Gilley Exchange Program, or the Gilley Program. It stands for Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, where cops from Georgia travel to Israel to receive training in quote unquote counterterrorism tactics. They exchange tips and tricks for conducting urban warfare against oppressed populations, treating every civilian as an enemy combatant. So America did not invent cop cities, as it turns out. Israel did. And the cop city in Atlanta is patterned off a facility they have in Israel, which is nicknamed Little Gaza, in which Israeli troops, they train for a full-scale invasion of Gaza, as well as day-to-day occupation. So the influence that traveled here from Israel via Gilley is very real and very clear. Another example is that it came out in 2023 that the Atlanta police had been running simulation drills in abandoned hotels to remove Hamas terrorists. That is what they called them. We don't have Hamas here, so that's kind of weird that they would be doing that. But, I guess maybe it makes it more fun for them. I don't know. So while running one of these exercises, they unexpectedly found some people who were living in this hotel as the result of economic decline, right? Cuts in services, a rise in homelessness. Luckily, none of these people were hurt on that day. Additionally, the way that the state thinks about the movement to Stop Cop City as a terrorist conspiracy, this mirrors how Israel talks about and deals with the Palestinian resistance. So obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison. There are plenty of differences between the US and Israel-Palestine, but there are also a lot of through lines, and people organizing around both of these issues can and should be working together. So a little bit about Cop City NYC now. In early June, our cop mayor, Eric Adams, announced at a press conference that they've got plans to build a $225 million expansion of a campus that's already owned by the NYPD in the neighborhood of College Point, Queens. So, so this campus is planning to train officers from all different parts of the state. all different departments, including the Department of Sanitation, Homeless Services, the Administration for Children's Services, and more, under the centralized instruction of the NYPD. So when you hear about how the welfare state is carceral, this is what they're talking about, right? It's going to make this problem worse by handing down the NYPD's most violent tactics to people in all different city agencies. And this is a problem that already exists, right? When we talk about how abolition needs to reach into all these different domains, into education, into housing, all these different places where the state interacts with the working class, where the state interacts with the poor. This is what we're talking about. This is going to make it so much worse. A video came out a few years ago, actually, of a group of officers and security guards tearing a 1-year-old child from his mother's arms after confronting this woman for sitting on the floor at a welfare office. Do you guys remember that? So that's the kind of thing that we have to look forward to when the cops are training people from all these different arms of the state. And I think this also ties in with what Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls organized abandonment, wherein the parts of the state that are at least ostensibly geared towards keeping people alive and mitigating so-called crime before it happens, they're systematically defunded, leaving opportunities for privatization and, private profit extraction. And we're left only with the police state, which is, again, using violence to allegedly stop crime, but actually to maintain a regime of race and class oppression. So that's a big deal. There are lots of comparisons, but again, it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison. The ecological element of Cop City, New York, for instance, is not as present as it is in Atlanta. We don't have a forest to play around in, which is, sad. But there are also a lot of parallels, and I think there are a lot of tactics that could work in New York City as well as we fight against this giant police training facility that they're trying to build and turn everyone who works for the state government into a cop. Of course, New York is already a cop city in many different ways, right? We are living in a surveillance state, but they've given us a focal point to organize our efforts around in this. So I hope that you'll join us, whether you're working with DSA or WDS or any other groups struggling together against this facility and the carceral state writ large, as we continue our fight over who the future belongs to. And I've got a QR code if you want to sign up for the Weelaunee Defense Society Telegram channel. You get updates. We're planning a cool public event coming up pretty soon that will have a barbecue element as well as a speakers element, so that should be fun. And you can follow us on Instagram at Weelaunee Defense _NYC. And I know that DSA is also working on this issue and has already done some things. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm gonna open up the Q&A now.